Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Cyber Science 2021. Today's theme is advancing cybersecurity education in a post-COVID world. In this session, I'm pleased to be joined by Martin Jaatun from the SINTEF in Norway. He's information security research scientist, at SINTEF. And his talk is titled Care and Feeding of Your Security Champion. So Martin, no further delay, I'll hand it over to you. You should be able to share your screen and I'll be the background if you need anything.
Thank you a lot. Let's see if this sharing works.
Yep.
Very good. Thank you for the introduction. And I will be proceeding to talk about how you should care and feed your security champion. Now, let's see. There we go. First of all, what is a security champion, and more specifically in this case, a software security champion? So many years ago, there's a guy called Gustav Wolfram in Sweden who wrote a paper where he basically said that one way to achieve security and agile development is to add a security expert in every team. And this sentiment has also been repeated in other areas. For instance, in the Building Security in Maturity model by Gary McGraw and colleagues, they've been talking about something they refer to as the satellite. And that's basically, so without going into too much detail in the BSIM, the BSIM is sort of centered around this idea of having a software security group, which is sort of a full-time, hopefully, group of people who contribute to software security work in the development organization. But in addition to that, they have this satellite, which is people with an above average interest in security who work as regular developers and then contribute to software security. So we have found, and we will talk more about this, but we have found that the main focus of the security champion should be on being a team player. So contributing to the development, so a developer rather than a security person. And that helps the security champion to be perceived as part of the solution rather than a source of new problems. The problem that has been experienced in the past, for instance, with penetration testers and other security people, or the IT security people, is that they are basically the guys that come in after you've done your development just to tell you that your baby is ugly. Now, the security champion should not be that guy. The security champion should be the go-to source for security functionality knowledge. So if you have a problem, you need to build an authentication mechanism into your software. You need to do key management. Okay, the security champion should be the guy that you could go to help with that, in addition to any other contribution to the general development. And the security champion is the natural person to lead software security activities. In other work, we have studied smaller software development organizations. And in the BSIM study, they say that the average size of a software security group is around 1 or 1.5% of the total development force. Now, at least in Norway, you find that a software company of 20 developers, that's definitely quite average, and to have larger companies like that is quite rare. And when you do the math, you'll find that with 20 developers and 1 or even 2%, you don't really have the opportunity to have a full-time software development group. Software security group. And that means that for many organizations, it makes more sense to focus on security champions as the first software security mechanism. Now, the other good thing about security champions is that they could serve as the link between the chief information security officer and sort of the IT security department and the developers. So this is a link that has frequently been missing today. So When starting out this particular activity, which is a part of the SOS Agile research project that recently completed, we asked ourselves, how can we introduce and maintain a security champion in an agile software development team? And then secondly, how are software companies applying the OWASP actions from the OWASP security champion playbook? And then in a slightly different tack, we asked, so there is this concept of champions of product innovations. And we asked ourselves, how can we learn from these kinds of champions? And finally, what challenges are the companies facing? So to take a step backward, Rogers, many years ago, wrote papers on diffusion of innovation. And this is, of course, innovation in general. So a new process, a new tool, whatever. And it starts out that, okay, you need to have knowledge about innovation. So you need to know about this thing that you might want to push, or you might want to make use of in your organization. And then there's the persuasion phase. So you need to be convinced, or maybe not convinced, about whether this is a good innovation to use. Of course, if you're not convinced, then it will stop there. However, if you're convinced that this is a good innovation, then there's a decision phase. Somebody needs to make decisions. Well, this would typically be somebody who actually had the power to decide, and maybe has budget control in some way. Then it needs to be implemented. This is where you take the innovation and you use it. And finally, there's a sort of post-confirmation phase where you build confidence in that this innovation was actually something which is useful and something that is worthwhile to use. Now, Howell has documented a number of steps for how you could breed security champions. So the first step is, well, fairly obvious. And again, we're still talking about innovations of products, or product innovations. You need to recruit and select those potential champions. And this is the general case where you, as a manager or whatever, you need to identify, okay, which people are suitable to champion various innovations. Might also be, some of these people are maybe not necessarily so easy to work with, but that does not necessarily mean that they're not useful as innovation champions. Then you also need to coach for skill development. And the next step is to mentor for career development. And this sort of, these two things, they are related. But the third point is also about building networks, sort of ensuring that you can get this networking going. The fourth step is to let champions volunteer. Of course, if you have champions that are already passionate about a particular innovation, then that makes it easier. And then you should recognize innovation achievements. This is sort of also reinforcing in that when people successfully manage to champion innovations, they should also be recognized for that. However, we must realize that not all such innovations actually succeed, and you should view this potential failure as a learning opportunity. Always sort of walk away from a failure with new knowledge. And then finally, you should raise the profile of champions. This sort of also ties back to the fifth point. So you should also make it more attractive to be a champion. Now, the Open Web Application Security Project, which is a volunteer project with origins in the US, they have created a playbook for how you should run a security champions program. And they have a number of points. Of course, we don't have time to dive really deep into it, but the first point is, of course, to identify the teams. And then you need to define the role, the champion role, and then naturally you need to nominate the champions. So once you've done all that, you need to set up communication channels. So one thing is of course that you would like to have champions communicating with the teams, but also with each other. And then you need to build a solid knowledge base. So the way we recommend identifying champions is, of course, we're talking about software security champions. You would like to select somebody, a developer, who is more than average interested in software security. But that doesn't mean that that person has to be a security expert from the onset. Could have some basic knowledge. That's usually it is a good thing, but you should use that opportunity to offer additional training and also to well, enable self-study and so on. And then finally, you need to ensure that you can maintain interest in the Security Champions program. We did a quick comparison of the recommendations from the playbook and the recommendations from Howell. And of course, the playbook mentions about identifying the teams, which Howell doesn't say anything about. That's maybe natural because Howell is talking about product innovation, whereas OWASP is about promoting security champions. Also, defining the role, defining the champion role is not mentioned by Howell. However, the nomination of the champions themselves, that is directly mapping to Howell's recommendation of recruiting and selecting potential champions. OWASP mentions setting up the communication channels, which is not mentioned by Howell, but they both mention, well, OWASP says build a solid knowledge base, whereas Howell says coaching for skill development. Now, Howell does mention also mentoring for career development, which is not mentioned directly by OWASP, but you might sort of link that to maintaining interest, which is again not mentioned by Howell. But here we see one specific difference between the OWASP Security Champion Playbook and Howell's recommendations, in that for Howell, championing a particular product innovation is not, once it's embedded, once it's a success, you don't need to do anything to maintain interest, because then it's self-perpetuating. For a software security champion, the work is never done. So that is something that just has to be ongoing. Howell basically says that champions should be able to volunteer for cool stuff. It's not specifically mentioned in the OWASP playbook, but it's sort of covered by what we have mentioned, in that it's you try to pre-select the people who are already interested in software security. And then recognizing innovation achievements is not specifically mentioned in the OWASP playbook, but it's something that we have found in our studies of 2 organizations, that security champions who may have known quite a lot about software security before they became champions have reported that the moment they have this title, security champion, people start listening more to them. So that's actually an important thing. Now, the 2 last items in Howell's list is not something we observed in the companies we studied. We didn't study this. We didn't see this viewing failure as a learning opportunity, and also not specifically raising the profile of champions. However, as already mentioned, we have this. As soon as somebody is a security champion, they do actually get listened to more, at least. So this item from the OWASP playbook about maintaining interest is very important. So you need to, for any software security initiative, you need to maintain the interest, and that's sort of course, in the security champion program, but in software security in general, because if you lose focus, then software security is bound to suffer. And that also means that you should be aware of ad hoc measures in terms of security champions. There is, we mentioned in the paper, a publication by Safecode, who is led by last year's keynote speaker, Steve Lipner, that ad hoc measures are not recommended for security champion activities. And this maintaining interest concept, it's much easier as soon as the champion is perceived as providing value in itself. So it goes back to this, that the security champion should be somebody who actually helps rather than brings more problems to the table. So the conclusion is that we have found that it's actually better to have 5 persons with, say, 20% champion time each in 5 teams, than to have a full-time champion who would divide their time among 5 teams. This sort of goes back to having the security champion being perceived as a part of the team who contributes to the development work in addition to doing this security champion function. Management support is, of course, crucial on many levels. First of all, it's crucial that management realizes that software security work actually takes time. You cannot, it doesn't come for free. And you need the management to acknowledge that, okay, so security champion X needs to be allowed to spend 8 hours of every week on doing software security work. And we have found that it's easier to breed a security champion from existing developers than to graft one on. This is an oft mentioned quote by Gary McGraw as well. He's said this to me personally, and also it's reported in a Silverbolt security podcast from a few years back. And we would say that even if you have to hire someone, so like I said initially, the natural choice for security champion is that developer who exhibits an above average interest in software security. So even if you don't have that person, so you ask around and you ask Jack and Jill and Eve and whoever is on your team, are you interested in software security? And they all say no. Okay, you might need to hire someone, but you shouldn't hire a security champion. You should hire another developer that sort of coincidentally also has an interest in software security, and then you can make that person a security champion. And with that, I am actually finished. So I would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Martin. We have a question here. It says, how do you expect to collect data about cybersecurity champions?
So I might maybe have spent some more time on that. So in the paper is based on some limited empirical research. We have studied two specific companies. We also have additional experience from other organizations in Norway, where we have discussed security champions in various aspects. But to relate specifically to the question from Bertrand, the way to collect data is actually to talk to people, and that's some of you may know the Canadian or Russian Canadian computer scientist. And now my mind went blank. Can't remember his name. But he was very active in agile software security about 10 years ago. And suddenly he completely stopped doing software security research. And I met him in Vancouver some years ago, and I asked him directly, so why did you stop doing software security research? And he said the reason that he got out of it was that it was impossible for him to get sort of companies to talk to him. Now, we have had the oh, I remember his name, of course. It's Konstantin Besnozov of UBC. We've had the opposite experience through very careful networking and careful collaboration with a number of software development organizations in Norway. We have been able to establish a trust relationship with these organizations to the extent where they were quite willing to not only to talk to us, but also willing to let us basically be embedded in their organization, observe, and do other forms of data collection. And that is, of course, crucial. That's the only way you can actually do empirical research on software security and security champions in particular, because you need to have that trust relationship.
All right, that's great. Then we have a question here from Tolga. It says, thank you, Martin, for this interesting talk. I was wondering what your take is on some of the gamification-based approaches by OWASP, for example, security pins and cornucopia. Are these effective approaches in training security champions?
Yeah, I guess I have to cop out and give the standard answer, it depends. We have also worked with some of these gamification related approaches earlier, maybe not specifically geared toward security champions, but we looked into protection poker, for instance, which was originally proposed by Laurie Williams. We also looked, we didn't use cornucopia directly, but we used the Microsoft Elevation of Privilege game, which is fairly similar. And we have found that these kinds of efforts are definitely useful. We have found that they are very suitable for sort of, how shall I put it, sort of kickoff kind of situations where you want to do a concentrated effort to raise the profile of software security. However, they are too time consuming to do on a regular basis. Now, to take protection poker as a case in point, that was designed by Laurie Williams to be something that you would do in the planning meeting of every sprint in an agile software development project. But that's not possible because sprint planning meetings are already too full of activities that the developers want to do, and they just cannot find time for it. It's interesting to note that in so the original protection poker empirical study was done at Red Hat. So Laurie Williams spent, I don't recall, maybe half a year or a year doing regular protection poker sessions at their sprint planning meetings. But we have since learned that after that particular project was finished and Laurie Williams moved on to bigger and better things, they dropped it. They didn't continue doing it. So it could be the kind of thing that makes sense for also for security champions when targeting specific things in a kind of a workshop setting, in kind of a periodic kind of focusing on specific things, but probably not as a regular thing.
All right. We don't have any other question there left in the Q&A, and then we are working on a very tight schedule. So I will thank you for the contribution and for the wonderful insights. And I will invite you, if you're available, and all the other attendees to join the next talk starting at 5:30 on the other link that you can find on the member area on the website. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.